Yeah, so what I want to do in this video is quickly, well not quickly, I'm just going to create like segments. There's 3 different things. One, I want to talk about what international standard is. The other is talked about mono blocks and 2-piece calipers. And then the third thing that I want to talk about is the kind of numbers and the disc sizes that you can use with these old kind of calipers. So yeah, first things first, we're talking about international standards. So what international standard is, it is the spacing on these kind of older calipers. So this one is a DH4, that's a pretty old caliper. We've got an old M4, Enduro 4, we've got a Mini, which is like, I think the original Mini, and then these are called the Mono. So yeah, they all run the same international standard. So if I grab these cheap caliper things, what we have is 51mm spacing between the center of this hole and the center of this hole, and they all run that 51mm space. So that is ultimately what international standard is. The other thing is, if you see it online, somebody might have something for sale and it says I.S caliper, and that's all it means. It's just abbreviation of international standard. So yeah, 51mm spacing between the bolt holes is what international standard is. The other standard, I guess, would be post mount, which is if we take I.S, an I.S caliper with a 51mm, and we take a post mount caliper, you can see it's completely different. I think one of the big differences is that it kind of bolts horizontally, whereas this will bolt vertically, and also there's thread within this caliper, so these bolts are actually threaded into the caliper, whereas the post mount calipers don't have any thread through them. You're actually bolting them kind of directly to the frames thread or the forks thread. So yeah, that's the difference really between the post mount and the international standard. Also with post mount, you've got 74mm distance between the center of the 2 mounts. So yeah, that's ultimately what I.S is, 51mm spacing, and that's what it looks like. So yeah, gives you an idea. And then we're just going to go on to monoblock and 2-piece calipers. Yeah, so in this part, what I wanted to do is go over the numbers. So when you get these older calipers, they come with little numbers stamped on them. This one, maybe not be able to see it, but it's a number 3. This one is a number 8. And this one on the back, just in there, is a number 5. So if we wanted to run this one, say you put it on your fork at the front, you would need to run it with a 185mm disc. So a number 3 on the front runs with a 185mm disc. If we then put this on the rear, on your frame mount, it would run with a 20mm disc deduction. So you've gone from a 185 front to a 165 rear. So that's on the number 3. Because this one is a number 8, this will actually run like a 205 front and a 185 rear. And I think what happens is people get confused between these, which are monoblock calipers because they're still using international standard mounts, the same as this, and these, which are 2-piece calipers. So these are 2 pieces that are then, there's a bolt here, here and here, and on this one it's quite easy to see, you've got 2 bolts at the rear and this big bolt at the front. So they're 2 pieces of metal that have been bolted together. And when it comes to the disc sizes, they're not compatible with the monoblocks. So what the monoblock is, it's like all the modern calipers. So even this post mount one is also a monoblock. It's just a single piece of aluminium that they have machined into a caliper. There's no bolts holding it together. And the thing is, with these ones, so I will put a link to a chart, hope to do a very easy to kind of follow chart on their website, and that will be in the description. These ones run on like a 165, a 185 and a 205mm. So they run on that kind of disc sizing, whereas the monoblocks are more traditional. They're kind of what we run even now. So they'll be running like, if you wanted to put this on the rear, maybe on a road bike, you could run it with a 140mm disc. It would then run a 160mm disc, 180mm disc, or a 200mm disc. It all depends on the number of the mount. So all those, so this is like a pre-2003 era system. and this is like a post 2003 era system, so you can't, let's say that they were the same mounts, so let's say that this is an 8 and this was an 8, and if we wanted to run this, or let's say we was running this and we was using this and we wanted to go over to this mono block, what we would have is a 205mm disc, because it was compatible with this caliper. And when we go and put this on, it's not going to work with a 205mm, because the 205mm is too big. It's going to be like 5mm too big. So that's because it's on a radius as well, it's going to be like 2.5mm too big. So yeah, you have to be a bit careful about the disc sizes, but ultimately there is a chart online. That's probably the best way, just to go on there to try and understand it. It's a bit of a complicated topic, and even now I get a bit confused with it. And I think when it comes to these older calipers, number 3, number 5 and number 8, and probably for the same for these as well with the mono blocks, they're the most common sizes. I think I've seen some 11s, maybe 12, but they're like Monster T. They're for like old Marzocchis. Number 6 is for like a Boxxer fork. So there is kind of different ones out there. So yeah, you just got to kind of go on the chart and check it and try and get your numbers right. And just remember that when you go from front to rear, you're going to have to downsize the disc by 20mm unless you want to run an adapter. So yeah, hopefully that has been of some use. I think that's pretty much it. I may just do a bit at the end that shows the difference between some of the calipers that people seem to get confused. So yeah, in this kind of end section, I guess I'm just comparing two calipers that people might get confused with. So when we look at these two, one is a M, so we say M for Mario, so one's an M4 and one is an Enduro 4. So this one is the M4, this one is the Enduro 4. I think the Enduro 4 is a bit older and it also has bigger pistons, so I believe it to be a bit of a more powerful caliper. So if you ever get confused about that, the M4s always tend to have M printed on them, and as you can see up here, this just has the number, doesn't have any M or anything like that. But yeah, the piston sizes are quite a bit bigger, but I guess if you only have one of them and you just have this caliper, it's kind of difficult to know what one you've got, because there's no identification really on there. But yeah, there you go, there is that aspect of it. The other one is the V2 and the X2. And you might be saying, well, this one's got V2 on it, etched, laser etched, and this one's got X2 on it, which is a fair enough point, but sometimes over a period of years, this stuff can get kind of worn away. And I have seen people listing quite a lot of V2s on eBay as X2s and not realizing that they are completely different calipers. And this one will take a lot more fluid to actually move the pistons. It's a kind of big downhill caliper. But as you can see, they're quite, if you only had one of them, you wouldn't really know. If that marking on there wasn't nice and clear, you wouldn't really know. And if you went online and you saw one of those for sale, and you're looking at it thinking, yeah, I've got this one. Oh, it's probably an X2 then. I'll list that as an X2 or sell that as an X2, and then somebody gets it and they might be a bit disgruntled when they realise that it's not an X2 and it's a V2. But yeah, there is some V2 on this side, some subtle differences. Probably the main one is this one has this kind of little dip right next to the banjo bolt. It's a bit machined here, whereas this is just nice and it's all flat. And also on the V2 you've got like a real straight edge there, whereas on the X2 you have kind of a little bubble, little lip to get over. But yeah, they kind of made them look very, very similar. The big problem is, if you did get the V2 and you wanted the X2, the V2 runs a different pad. It runs a much longer pad, much thicker, and they actually have to have their own kind of specific V2 disc for you to get the power, to get the actual use out of them. If you just run the normal kind of disc that Hope do, it's not going to be thick enough, wide enough. But yeah, you may be able to see some differences there. And the V2s don't all come with like a blue bore cap. As standard, most of them are just black. So, but yeah, there you go. There's your X2 and your V2. I think that's it really. I think that's the video done. guess with this one, there's kind of less chance that people would confuse them, because I've done a better job with them, I guess, with the markings. But maybe if someone's crashed them and scraped all that off, you wouldn't really know. So we've got E4, we've got an M4, and we've got a V4. These are actually early M4s. So what you might be able to see is that you've got a bigger piston at the front, smaller at the rear. They tended to come in silver, and there's no kind of markings on them. I think they just have a Hope logo there. You do have 974 printed on there, which just means post mount is the 74mm difference. And when we look at them compared, it's going to be a bit difficult. This is all wrapped up in a brake, but if you look at them, you know, it could be confusing if they were the same colour. But this bigger piston is what this E4 runs on all 4 of its pistons. But they did do an M4 which has 2 of these big size pistons, but I don't have it, so that would be even more confusing because it looks more like the E4. But yeah, just try and show people like side to side, see if there's any like major differences. Obviously these older ones, they got quite a thick, quite a heavy texture, which is quite nice. A lot of ridges on them that you can really feel, whereas the E4 is a lot smoother. And also the E4 has this kind of little tab just there, so that when you connect the banjo bolt, you just butt it up to there. So that's kind of nice, keeps things kind of straight when you're tightening it. Whereas this one, you know, the big difference is the banjo bolt is at the side, and also this kind of area here. On the E4, they kind of put a little bit more effort, I guess, into the design of it and machine these kind of nice little patterns in there. But I guess a lot of people would confuse the V4 and the E4. But the major difference is, from a visual point anyway, is that the V4 has all these ridges. So we try and see that. So you've got like lines cut into the caliper, as well as the same 2 lines as the E4 as well. Don't know why I'm doing it that way, I'm showing myself there. Yeah, so you've got all these lines on the E4. Up here, there we go. There you go. Whereas on the V4, sorry, whereas on the E4, you don't have those lines, it's kind of smooth along there. But other than that, really, they're very similar in their appearance. And you can probably maybe able to see that the V4 runs a bigger piston on the front, whereas the E4 runs these 2 same size. I think they're called HBSP 136. I'm not too sure on that, if that's the part number. But the V4 smaller piston is the same size as the E4 pistons, so they share the piston. It's just this one's a bit bigger, which is where the V4 gets the extra power. So yeah, very, very kind of similar and maybe a little bit confusing. Yeah, and I thought just finally, we've already been for the M4 and the E4. This one is called DH4, which is probably my favourite. It's just a, I don't know, it's just a weird looking caliper with this big chunky tail on the end. It's not really doing anything, but yeah, bit of an early one. And then this one is called XC4. So yeah, if you get kind of confused, maybe you can use the video as a reference. And this is one of the 51mm as well, international standard, so split caliper, 2-piece. So yeah, there you go.